While you're taking notes, wait, hold up another 10 seconds. Yeah, you can go when you're ready.
Okay. Hi guys, so looking forward to talking you through a bit about B2B cold calling today. Thanks to James and the team at Sales Confidence for inviting me to do this. Going to share some of my experience over the last 15 years of making B2B cold calls and talk you through the structure of cold call that has worked well for me and for my teams over the years. I think cold calling is one of those things where you get a range of opinions on what works and what doesn't work. And of course, a lot of it is down to style, the market you're selling in. And one of my favorite answers to the question on what's the best way to do something is always, it depends. And of course it does. So I am going to share a couple of ideas around how you can structure your cold calls with success in mind, some things that may well work for you, some things that work for people with different styles, and just try and put some logic behind what you say, why you say it, how you say it throughout a B2B sales call. What I will do is preface all of this by saying that there is a certain sales style that I like to use. And if you think about the sort of the range of sales personas, you've got everything from the old-fashioned hard sell through to the more gentle farmer-based sales profile, and everything in between. My style and the style that I coach around is typically what I refer to as trust-based or permission-based sales. So we're looking to blend a little bit of things like challenger in there, where we might ask difficult questions, we might challenge a prospect in a positive way, but ultimately the core of the way that we sell is built on the relationship that we build with that person across the time that we have with them on the phone. So are we looking to become their best friends in the space of somewhere between 3 to 6 minutes? No, absolutely not. What we are looking to do is build an ounce of rapport, earn their trust, and come across as somebody who's professional and credible and knows their stuff, somebody that they should and can listen to and take advice from. And if we can overcome that piece at an interpersonal level, then we can do a hell of a lot of good things on that call. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to dive into some slides to try and guide you through this and give you a reference point as we go through. And we're going to walk through the structure of a cold call. Now, the summary of this is, of course, we've got different parts of the call. So we tend to split the call into a number of sections. What we call introduction. What's your first impression? Your pitch or your elevator, the thing that you say that is compelling, that gets their attention. And then we move through to a part of the call that we use, that I've coached around for a long time, but that a lot of people skip, which is how you transition from your elevator pitch into actually earning the right to go into discovery mode and ask questions. We then talk a little bit around the discovery questions that we ask and why we ask what we ask and what kind of questions work. And then, of course, we move through to how we actually close for the meeting. And then there are a couple of bits in this that if we can get time to, we'll look at things like objection handling and how we wrap up the call at the end to make sure the prospects turn up for the meeting that you book. As I've said up front, this is not going to be something that you can read, try once and it works. There is no magic bullet or silver bullet in sales. It's about practice. And of course, I will give you a couple of ideas and a couple of options on how you can structure your call so that you can choose the ones that best play to your style. Not everybody sells the same. I can't coach you a way that you should do it. What I'm hoping to do is prompt some thinking and ideas. Anything that you adopt from this, it won't work once. You've got to try it and try it again. You've got to rehearse it and practice it until it sounds natural. And as you do it more and more, it will become less and less fake in your mind, and it will feel like it's you after a period of time. So here's our 3 options for how to introduce yourself on a cold call. None of them are right. What I would say is clearly there's a bit before this, which is getting through the gatekeeper. That's a skill in itself. But for the sake of this session, I'm going to assume that you've now got somebody on the end of the phone who's answered the phone, and that person is the person you want to speak to. They are the VP of sales. They are the CEO, the founder, whoever it is that you sell to in your market. So option 1, I'm going to talk to James Ski here. He's going to be my prospect. Hi, James. Owen here, calling from Air Marketing. We've not actually spoken before, but I'm just hoping you can help me out for a moment. As with anything, a lot of it's in the delivery. We need to be calm. We need to be collected. We need to sound confident and assertive without sounding over enthusiastic and arrogant. So I really like this introduction because what it does is it lays a foundation of honesty at the beginning of a conversation. The fact that we've not spoken before tells you that I'm not pretending to be anything I'm not. And it's a softer way of doing the more salesy version, which is this is a cold call. Do you want to hang up right now? Which of course is becoming more and more popular. We're not looking to do a dramatic pattern interrupt at this part of the conversation. What we're looking to do is earn their trust, build rapport. And I think when you think about somebody answering the phone to somebody they've never spoken to before, what do they want to know? They want to know, who is it? What do you want? Do I know you? What's this call about? So we're looking to get to that short and sharp. So, hi, James. My name's Owen, calling from Air Marketing. We haven't actually spoken before, but I'm just hoping you can help me out for a moment. And then we just pause and we wait for James to come into the conversation. Now, that pause is really important. What we're doing to James in that scenario is saying, hey, James, I'm going to talk at you for 5 seconds, and then I'm inviting you into the conversation. This is a two-way conversation. That starts to build trust. Of course, salespeople that don't necessarily earn trust are people that talk at you rather than invite you into the conversation. And I think it's a fairly old-fashioned mindset that we need to not let prospects into the conversation because they might say no. My attitude is the opposite. I want them to say no, because if they say no, I can deal with that there and then. I can handle the objection. I can understand where they are, or I can save myself myself time talking to somebody who doesn't want to talk to me and move on to the next call. So there's a lot of positive things that can come from inviting a prospect into the conversation. Option number 2, hi James, Owen calling from Air Marketing. We haven't spoken before. I'm just hoping to have 30 seconds to tell you why I chose to call you today. There are some really nice amendments and adjustments and personalizations you can put on this. So I particularly like, we haven't spoken before, but this is a carefully chosen sales call. I'm hoping to have 30 seconds to tell you why I chose you to call today. So that can make it feel a bit more personal. You do have to be a bit more brave to take that sort of approach. And I think it comes with style again. And then option 3, a little bit more salesy. You'll hear this more and more now. Hi, James, it's Owen calling from Air Marketing. Look, I'll be honest with you. This is a cold call or a sales call, but I'm just hoping to have 30 seconds to tell you why I called. Now, you can tweak these to your own style, but hopefully what it gives you is a scenario where you know what you're going to say, what comes out of your mouth when somebody's on the other end of the phone. What shouldn't you do? How are you today? It's a bugbear of mine. It is absolutely something that adds zero value to a sales call. If you think about somebody you've never spoken to asking you, how are you today? We A, know it's a sales call. B, we know they don't really care. And you end up with that awkward silence. And what I find is that it detracts from a cold call. It actually fills space when you've got a limited time with something that is disingenuous. And remember, what we want to do is build trust with prospects. We want to earn the right for them to trust us, build rapport, start to build some kind of a relationship with them. And we can't do that by starting our conversation by being disingenuous. So I like all 3 of these options, and you can restructure them to your own style. But ultimately, this is about get in, say something quickly, invite them into the conversation to show them that this is a two-way conversation. What we should get is some kind of positive response or neutral response. Of course, you will get people who say, no, I'm not interested, whatever, at that time. But the majority of people will be curious, inquisitive, or polite enough to say, okay, crack on, in their own style. That might be a bit of silence. That might be okay. It might be yeah, sure, go for it. And, I think it doesn't matter so long as you're getting that permission to enter into a two-way conversation. Then we move into the bit that really has the impact. So you phone somebody out of the blue. They're in the middle of doing their accounting. They're in the middle of responding to a client's email. They're in the middle of making their own sales calls. Who knows what they were doing before you call them? But ultimately, they weren't sitting there waiting for your call. So we've got to quickly get to the point. So we like to structure our elevator pitch around a couple of points. Point 1 is to be relevant. I'm with Air Marketing, or I work for Air Marketing, or I'm calling from Air Marketing. We work with, and then we use some kind of relevant statement at that point. So if your target market is manufacturing companies, say manufacturing companies. If your target market is Series A, SaaS organizations, say that. The more relevant you can be, the better. So it could be we work with VPs of sales, or we work with SDR managers, or we work with CEOs of early stage companies or SaaS companies. The more relevant you can make it, the better, but we need to be careful that we know our target market. What I coach around here in particular is to be able to take a cold call approach that works en masse, but still make it feel like it's slightly personalized or relevant. Of course, you can go down the hyper relevant, hyper personalized route where you research prospects loads. If you get your data strategy right, I believe you shouldn't need to do that. If you segment your data into sectors, size of organization, geographical areas, regions, whatever it might be, then you're likely to be able to find ways to be relevant without wasting or using all that time to research. So our pitch would go something like this. I'm calling from Air Marketing. We work with SaaS organizations to help them achieve more sales pipeline and faster growth. Most of the organizations we're talking with are battling with problems like, for example, SDRs not regularly hitting targets, increasing targets to get towards the next round of investment, or struggling to hire the right SDRs in the right place. So what we're doing there is walking through a statement of relevancy, telling them what the end outcome is. We help them to achieve more pipeline and faster growth, and telling them what other people that look like them have as challenges. So we're not telling them that's their challenge. We're making an assumption that they're in that same sort of ballpark. What do those three things do? Well, part one makes us seem like we're relevant. Part two talks to them about the outcome, not the process. What we find is that most salespeople sell the process. They sell the product, not the outcome. People care about the outcome. What can you do for me? Not how do you do it at this stage? That can come later. What do you do? So we, as an outsourced SDR agency, sell meetings, pipeline, revenue. We don't sell the phone calls that lead us to there, or the emails that we send, or the LinkedIn messages and connections and content that we produce. We're purely selling on the outcome. We can then backtrack through the process and how we do it once we've earned the right to do that. If we start bogging people down with process at this point, they're not interested in that, and it is simply not impactful enough. So we want to do part one, we're relevant. Part two, here's the outcome you're going to get from working with us. And part three, here's me showing that I understand the problems that you're likely to be solving. Here is me showing that I understand your sector, your stage. And again, it's a double point on relevancy. So whatever you do, you can probably achieve this. So we work with companies like X. You're looking for something relevant. So let's look at something totally different. We work with manufacturing companies to help them to get their product to their customers a lot faster. Most of the companies we work with are struggling with logistics, costs increasing left, right, and center, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I don't know if that example is a good one, but the point is you can slot in the bits that are relevant to your sector, your total addressable market, and your organization and your messaging accordingly. For me, if you read that out, I'm working with Air Marketing Group, or I work for Air Marketing Group, or I'm from Air Marketing. We work with ambitious SaaS companies in their early stage to drive more pipeline in and feed faster growth. Most of the organizations we work with simply don't generate enough pipeline because their SDRs aren't hitting target regularly enough, or they struggle to find the right talent. If you time that from beginning to end, 15 seconds, we're not talking about a long period of time there. We want to be snappy, poignant, to the point, impactful, and then guess what we're going to do? We're going to invite them back into the conversation. So have a go at structuring your messaging around that. Don't make it too long. Try and achieve those 3 points, and try to not talk about you. Try to not talk about your product. Try to not talk about the software that you're selling. Talk about the outcome that it is going to deliver to the people that you're talking to. Now, I talked at the top about this part of the conversation, and it's a part of the conversation that I think people get lost on. So everybody's got some kind of elevator pitch. How you structure it now may not be the same as what I've talked about, but you'll have it. This is what we do. This is how we help you, whatever it is that you're saying. What people then tend to do is immediately ask a question. So what kind of challenges are you suffering with right now? Or what do you have in place right now? My view is that at this stage, you're missing a really critical point to, again, build trust with the prospect. So what have I done so far? I've introduced myself and I've invited them into the conversation. I've gained permission to give my elevator, effectively. I then give my elevator, which is short, sharp, punchy, impactful, shows that I'm credible and relevant. Now I'm inviting them back into the conversation. And again, I'm going to hit them with something that's really honest. So the wording that I would use is the option 1 here to say that I'm calling from Air Marketing. We help early stage SaaS organizations to build more pipeline and grow revenue much faster. Most of the organizations we talk to are struggling with hiring the right SDR talent or getting their SDRs to consistently hit target. Now, I don't know if anything like I don't know enough about your situation to know if anything like this would make sense for you. So would it be okay if I just ask you a couple of really quick questions? Again, we're inviting them back into the situation, into the conversation. We're telling them we don't know about their situation. We're not pretending that we know everything. We're not making assumptions. We're being honest and upfront here. We're giving them an opportunity to come back into the conversation. The brilliant thing about this part of the call is that you get one of 3 outcomes. You either get, yeah, absolutely happy for you to ask those questions. As a salesperson, if I've given you my pitch and I then ask you for permission to ask questions, I can be fairly confident that if you've said yes, you want to be in this conversation. That gives me a confidence boost, and it means that I know I'm speaking to somebody who's finding what I've said to them relevant. That's a really good starting point for a conversation. If they say no, and they do quite often say, no, look, I'm not interested in what you've got to offer, my default response to them would be to say, hey, James, that's absolutely fine, not a problem. Could I just ask you, tell me what stops you from saying yes to having this conversation with me right now? It's a really powerful way to get them to give you the reason. What is the reason? Because, of course, our default reaction is to say why. And the tonality around when we ask why sounds a bit childlike. Look, I don't want to have the conversation with you. Why? It's almost challenging, and that doesn't support the philosophy behind the way that we want to build rapport with people. So we word that question the other way round. It's absolutely fine, James. So we put a positive in there. Not a problem at all. Tell me, out of interest, what stops you from saying yes to wanting to have this conversation with me right now? It's a really calm, open-minded way of asking that why question without using that word. So option number 1 is they say yes, and you get confidence to continue with the conversation. Option number 2 is that they say no, and we default through to that question. And what that should do is give you an objection that you can handle. Oh, it's because of X, and I'll deal with that in a moment. The third option is that they actually give you that objection there and then. So when you say, I don't know enough about your situation to know if something like this would make sense for you. So James, do you mind if I ask you just a couple of really quick questions? They say, look, Owen, I'm going to say no, and this is why. We've already got a supplier that does this for us. We've got this scenario. We're going through a funding round. We've got too much on right now. The beautiful thing about them giving you an objection there and then is that you get the opportunity to handle the thing that's most important to them. The prospect has chosen to bring that to the conversation off their own back. They've offered that as a piece of information. So you now know that's really important to them. It's relevant. So stick on that. Start to ask them questions around that. That's brilliant. Thanks for letting me know about that, James. Tell me, with that funding round, what stage are you at? What's the timeline on that? How much are you looking to raise? What are you looking to spend that money on when it comes in? What's the growth strategy after that point? When was the last time you got funding? Whatever your questions are that you want to find out about, be genuinely curious. And guess what's happened? You've actually got into discovery mode anyway. You've done it regardless of the fact that they said no originally. So the purpose of that second response when they give you a straight no is to get you into discovery. Your end goal there is simply to get to discovery. And if you can get to discovery, you've done well. If you ask that question, tell me, why, ultimately what's stopping you from having this conversation with right now? And they say, look, just not interested, it's not right, blah, blah, and they really obviously are not there and not present in the conversation. That's your opportunity to dive out of the conversation. And of course, if you'd have just gone directly into questions, you may not have had that. I see that as a positive, because your job as a salesperson is to find out if there is a fit between what you have to offer and the problems and the challenges that a prospect might have. If they don't have those problems and challenges right now, or they do, but they're not important enough to fix right now, you carrying on with a conversation with them is probably likely to be a use of your time that's not beneficial. So you're actually better to find out that there's not a fit in some ways and find out when a good time in the future might be to speak to them. So that is why we asked that question. And you'll see there's an option 2 there. I'm sure you're going to tell me that most of this is covered within your business already. But I just wondered if I could ask you a couple of quick questions, which will help you establish whether we can help or not. And if I can't, I'll leave you alone. Does that sound fair? I prefer option 1 in this. I think it's a lot more conversational, a lot more professional. Option 2 is quite a salesy approach, but for the brave of you out there, it may well work quite well. And as with the bits before, you can blend them, you can tweak these to be more around your own wording, your own style. But the psychology behind this part of the conversation is twofold. One, we invite them back into the conversation. We're trying to earn their trust. This is a two-way conversation, James. Come and talk with me. Let's have a normal human conversation. It's a great way to build trust and rapport with the prospect. And the other is we either gain that permission to continue, which gives us confidence and positivity in the conversation. You know they're there because they want to, or hopefully we get to the objection and we get to what's important. So rather than asking questions about something over here, we can focus the questions on the things that are most important to them. That's really good. It gives us clues to know where to go with the conversation. Let's assume you get into discovery. So let's assume we've gone through the, hi James, my name's Owen, I'm calling from Air Marketing. We've not spoken before. I'm just hoping you can help me out. And James says, yeah, sure. Go for it. Thanks, James. Look, as I said, I'm calling from Air Marketing. We work with SaaS organizations, typically in their early stages, who are trying to grow, and we help them to drive more pipeline into, or more sales opportunities into their pipeline and drive revenue faster. Most of the organizations we speak to are struggling with hiring the right SDR talent, keeping the right SDR talent, or they've got SDRs who aren't consistently hitting target. Now, James, I don't know enough about your situation to know if any of those things would make sense for you. So would it be okay if I just ask you a couple of quick questions? Okay, so there's an Air Marketing pitch right there. Not a long conversation. He's been invited back into the conversation twice, and here we are. James says yes. Now, I've got a choice. What question do I ask first? And I think this is potentially the piece of the conversation where the best salespeople really set themselves apart, because anybody can structure that conversation I've just read. Tonality makes a difference, the way you sound, the way you structure your sentences, all those sorts of things. Confidence plays a difference, but ultimately those words can be spoken by you or I, and they can be the same 50 times a day. So you get good at it regardless of how good a salesperson you are, and you can regurgitate the majority of that. The responses from prospects are one of two or three things, and it's fairly predictable. When we get into discovery mode, it becomes much harder because, of course, we've now got a blank canvas. We don't know what the prospect's answer is going to be, so we can't go from question 1 to 10 in order. We have to be intuitive, we have to go with the prospect, and we have to follow their lead to some degree. My advice to you in this part of the conversation is we're looking for a fit. Be genuinely curious and ask the natural next question. If you try to ask a predetermined set of questions in order, you will sound like you're surveying, you'll lose that trust, you'll fail to build rapport with prospects. So my advice to your questioning is to turn a pyramid upside down, start as broad as you can, give a prospect a nice, broad, easy to answer question to start with. So James, just out of interest, how many people have you got in your sales team right now? He hasn't got to think about the answers that too hard. It's not challenging. It's not too sensitive. It's not a question that he's unlikely to not want to answer at this stage. It's a nice, easy one just to get us started and get the ball rolling. So it doesn't have to be that question, but think of 2 or 3 questions that you can ask a prospect that are relevant but aren't that challenging. So James, out of interest, what's the structure of your sales team right now? How many people, how many SDRs have you got? Sit back and let James talk. All right, nice open questions as always. We're not looking for a yes or no. And James may or may not give us clues. So he may well say, oh, I've got 5 SDRs in the team. That's it. Okay, brilliant. You've got 5 SDRs. How long have those SDRs been with you? Okay, so I'm now asking a few more details and I can dig into the questioning and be a bit more curious about that team. I've got a clue. Now I'm going to dig into that. So we're getting more narrow with our questions. Of course, James may say, I've got 5 SDRs. And to your point earlier, it's hard to get them all hitting target all the time. And we are trying to grow the team. All right, I've got 2 or 3 clues there. Now I can ask more questions around those things. What I see salespeople doing far too regularly is asking a question, getting a clue, and then moving away from it and asking a different question. So, hi Jess, how many people do you have in your sales team right now? I've got 5 SDRs, but we are hiring right now. Okay, and what does your sales tech stack look like? No. Stick on the point. Got 5 SDRs and we're looking to grow. Okay, you're looking to grow. How many are you looking to bring into the team? Keep them on the topic. They've given you that answer. off of their own back. It's important to them, so keep them on topic. Ask more questions around it so that you can dig deeper and get more clues. So in this scenario, James is saying to me he's growing the team. He's going to bring in another 2 or 3 SDRs. Okay, fine. How long have you been looking for those SDRs? Is that a new thing, or have you been looking for a while? We've been looking for a couple of months. Okay. And what stopped you finding the right people right now? The market is tough. How are you looking for those people right now? We're using 2 recruitment agencies. Okay, fantastic. How many candidates have you seen right now? Here we go. What we're doing is just being curious. You'll notice that what I'm not doing is leading him towards my service. What I'm doing is listening. I'm being a great listener. I'm being a confidant. I'm being somebody that James can open up to. Why? It's obvious, right? I'm building rapport and I'm earning his trust. All the way through this, I'm asking relevant questions that shows that I'm in the market. I understand his position. I understand his, the structure of the organization and what's going on. So I'm credible. And I'm also building that personal relationship with him. And I'm actively listening. I'm showing that I'm listening by not going through my questions, but by letting the conversation run. The ideal scenario is that you just almost forget that you're in a sales call. You're just in an Owen and James conversation that's natural. You're asking normal questions like you would with a friend down the pub. If a friend down the pub said, oh, do you know what? I'm having real difficulties with my husband or wife at home. You wouldn't go, oh, okay, fair enough. What are you doing on Saturday? It's irrelevant at that point in time. Your question would be, oh, tell me what's going on. Can I help? You'd be in and talking about what's relevant. They tell you a little bit. You might ask another question to try and find out more and get them to open up. It's the same principle. You need to be natural in this part of the conversation, and your questions need to be relevant at all times. So we're starting nice and broad. We're asking really easy to answer questions because that is more likely to get the prospect talking. And as we get clues, we're then digging in on those pain points. So what I identified in that example before is that James is hiring for 2 or 3 more SDRs, and he's been hiring for a couple of months. He's got a couple of recruitment agencies on it, and he's not seeing the right people because the market is tough. So now I want to dig in on that and ask more challenging questions. So James, what does that mean? Because I'm guessing you're looking to grow revenue by taking new SDRs on. Those couple of months you've been looking and not finding the right people, what challenges is that causing? Well, put simply, we're not hitting our growth targets. Okay, now I'm in a problem. I'm finding a challenge that I can solve. And that's what I need to be doing. Is there a fit between this current situation in that organization that James is dealing with and what I can offer? Yeah, of course there is. Because in my scenario, outsourced SDR services could be a really good way to solve that problem where James is struggling to find SDRs. You'll need to do some translation into your services here, but you see the point. We're asking broad questions and then we're digging into the clues that the prospect gives us. And the trick is to get the prospect to open up. We want them opening up more and more. You may not get that open up on the first question. You might need to ask 2 or 3 really good questions that are quite broad and quite easy in order for James to start opening up. Don't get too niche too early. Don't get too specific too early with your questions. And certainly don't go in with are you hitting your sales target type questions? You can if you want to, but be prepared for prospects to push back. For some, it will work and it will get you straight to the point really quickly. And typically that's with your more dominant senior profiles. With people who are perhaps more gentle, more conversational, they like to warm into things. So I think you can make a judgment based on the profile of the person you're speaking to. And then finally, we want to close, right? So what we've done through our questioning is identify that they might have a problem that we can solve. You'll note that at no point have I said what we do. At no point in this conversation have I said, we are an outsourced SDR company and we want to give you outsourced SDR services. I've simply shown that I'm relevant, I'm credible, and that I understand the problems and the challenges that they may well be facing. And I've asked the right questions to identify whether they have those challenges. So if you've asked good enough questions, you should know, is there a good fit? Can you help? Is their problem important to them? Are they engaging with you in a conversation? And you'll see that on the screen here, points 1, 2, 3, and 4 towards the top. And assuming you feel good, assuming you feel like it's the right thing to do, you can go and close. Now you can just go straight into the close. Look, James, I think we can help you with this problem. What I'm going to recommend, or what I'm going to suggest, is that I book a time for you to sit with one of my AEs or sit with one of my team so they can talk you through how we might be able to help solve this problem. I can do that tomorrow or the day after, what works best for you. I can go straight into close. We know that in sales, most things aren't black and white. They're not totally clear. Sometimes we get a sense there's something there, but we're not 100% certain if we go and close for the meeting, it's going to close. So we can do what we call a trial close or a temperature check. So James, look, it sounds like you're focused on bringing these SDRs in, but it's been a bit of a pain in the backside in terms of timescales, and it's a challenging market. So if I could show you a way that might help you solve that problem, is that something you'd be open to spending 20 minutes or half an hour in a conversation with me on, or one of my colleagues on? You're not asking for the meeting at that time, but what you're doing is just testing the water, trial close or temperature checking. If James says, yeah, I'd be happy to have another conversation, or indeed, if he comes back and says, well, can you tell me a bit more about it? You can be confident that you've got an engaged prospect that you should be able to book a meeting with. You can then go through to the close. So either they say, yes, I'd be happy to do that. Great. Well, look, what I'd like to do then is that I book a meeting with so-and-so. Here are the next steps. And I go and close for the meeting. If James's response is possibly what I'd like to do, and he brings back a question to you, then it's a great opportunity to say, look, it's a great question. That's exactly why I want to book a time in, because I've caught you off the hop right now. You probably You probably weren't prepared for this conversation. And I'm also conscious that what I'd like to do is bring in one of my head of department, my AE, or one of my colleagues who's a lot more experienced than I am to help answer some of the more complex questions. So how about, rather than me try and answer your questions now when you've probably got 5 minutes, we put in 20 minutes, 30 minutes in the next couple of days when it works for you, and we can dig in a bit more on how we might be able to help and how we might be able to help solve that problem. How does that sound? So we've got that trial close and temperature check as an option. You don't have to use it, but of course it is a great way to give you the confidence to close, or indeed to find out that they're not ready and deal with the objection that they have. So if I try and temp check or trial close and Jane says, I'm not sure because I'm busy, and they say, well, okay, let's just go back to some of the points that you were talking about. You were talking about this challenge. Can I just understand a bit more about that? And I'm back into discovery mode. So I've now got the chance to go and earn the right to get back to the close at a later stage in the conversation. One of the pieces that we like to coach people around is, what do you do once somebody agrees to a meeting? What I see most reps do is rush, get off the phone. Thanks, James. Great. That's all booked in. I'll send you a calendar invite. Off we go. And it kind of leaves prospects a bit confused, not kind of sure what they've agreed to, not clear on what's going to happen next. Just because you get a meeting, you don't need to rush away. My advice to you is spend a minute or two with the prospect on clarifying what will happen next. So James, look, that's fantastic. Thank you. Just to summarize, what I've done is I've put an invite in for 2 o'clock tomorrow. I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Harry. Harry's an AE in our business. And we're going to be talking around how we can help you generate more pipeline and accelerate your sales revenue. Now, I'm going to send a calendar invite now. I'll also send a confirmation email. If you've got any questions between now and tomorrow, let me know. I might just drop you a line in the morning as a reminder, just to make sure that we're all okay for that time still as well. And I'll ping you a little email with some further information just in preparation for the meeting. Between now and tomorrow, I will also let Harry know the detail of our conversation. So I'll give him a bit of a brief. I don't want him to come in and ask you the same questions. That way we can make best use of tomorrow. Is there anything from your side, James, that you want me to do between now and tomorrow? No, that's fine. Cool. Brilliant. Okay, that's good. Well, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Thanks for your time today. Done. So that little piece there is a really nice way just to wrap it up, keep it clean, let them know what to expect, and show that we're professional and we're prepared, and we do this all the time. Again, it is a step that I see a lot of people stick. Why do we do this? One, it helps our AEs have the best chance of closing opportunities when they get to that meeting. Two, it impacts on attendance rate massively. Since the pandemic, with meetings mostly being virtual in particular, and people having so many virtual meetings, we've seen attendance rates drop significantly. So anything and everything that you can do to make sure that that prospect is there tomorrow at 2 o'clock for Harry's call with them, you absolutely should do. It can be the difference between hitting revenue targets or not for your AE, but also for yourself if you're contributing to revenue or you're held accountable for contributing to revenue, as all good sales members, team members should be, regardless of their role. Finally, I just want to touch on objection handling. So most sales calls don't go the way of the example that I've given you today, where the prospect says yes to everything. And I've already kind of hinted at a couple of the objections you might get through the conversation. We like to use a formula that is consistent across any objection for handling objections. And it's this. We call it DSQ, diffuse, statement, question. And if you can remember this and practice this, it's a really nice way to not have to think if you get thrown an objection. So diffuse means take the pressure out of the situation, turn a negative into a positive, take that kind of negative mindset away from the prospect. So a really good way to do that is just to say, that's fine, James, not a problem at all. Absolutely fine. Then we make a statement. So we kind of link into our next piece by making a statement that takes them away from the objection or that just normalizes it. So my favorite statement that is generic and that you can use in every situation is, that's fine, James, not a problem at all. Do you know what? Most of the people I speak to actually say exactly the same thing. You can use that in any scenario. There are lots of more specific statements that you can prepare for. And if you know the objections your prospects are likely to give you, you should be prepared for that. But if you want a generic one that works every single time in terms of just transitioning to the next part and that's fairly healthy in the conversation, that's it. Because it makes a prospect feel like they're just part of everybody else and this is normal and everything's okay. So if James says to me, look, we're already using a supplier for this and we're happy with them, that's fine, James, not a problem at all. Do you know what? Most of the people I speak to say exactly the same thing. And then what we do is we transition to asking a question. Tell me, out of interest, how long have you been working with that supplier for? So I'm not saying it's the right question. What I am saying is I'm back into discovery mode. So our objective when we start to get an objection is to get back to discovery mode. If we hang on that objection and put too much focus on it, we end up feeding the negative and we end up putting the focus on the thing that's making them say no, potentially. So we want to move them away from the objection, but we can't just ignore it. We can't just say, thanks, James, but I'm going to ignore that and talk about something else. So this is a very good transition from an objection into where you want to be, which is discovery. So any objection you can handle in this way. Look, we haven't got budget for this right now. Look, James, that's absolutely fine. Not a problem at all. Do you know what? I think you're probably the 10th person that said that to me today. I think a lot of people are in that situation. Tell me, out of interest, when do your budgets get assigned at the beginning of the year? Or another question might be, if you wanted to free up some budget for something that was really important to fix a problem that was important to you, how would you go about that normally? Again, it doesn't really matter what that question is, as long as it's open and it gets the prospect talking, because then you get time to think about what your next question might be. So here are some examples. We're already using an external company for this. That's great, James. Absolutely fine. There's your diffuse. To be honest, most of the people I speak to say exactly the same thing. And what I'm not expecting for you to do is tell me you'll change supplier based on one conversation. Tell me, if you could, though, just change one thing about their services. You can wave a magic wand and change one thing. What would it be? So again, I'm back into discovery. You'll see there that my statement is actually a double statement. Why am I doing that? Well, it buys me time to think about the next question sometimes, but also it just solidifies that point of I'm being honest with them. I'm being upfront. It's okay that you're giving me an objection. Here's number two. We've tried this before and it didn't work. That's fair enough, James. Look, you know what? You're not alone. I hear it all the time. It's a shame given there are good options out there within this sector. Tell me, when you engaged with that supplier, what was it that made you do that? What was it that drove you to work with that supplier in the first place? Well, we were trying to solve this problem. Okay, cool. Guess what? I'm back into discovery mode. I can now ask another question. And there's the third example around budget. So I hope that what you can do is take the objections that you get, which probably fit into these sorts of categories. We're already using it. We're fine. We do this in-house. We don't have finances or budget for this. We use another supplier and we're in contract. Any of those you can use in this way. That's absolutely fine, James. Not a problem at all. A lot of the people I speak to say exactly the same thing to me. Tell me, just out of interest, and then I'm into a really good discovery open question that just links us back into conversation. And all we're doing is going back into discovery mode and asking more questions so we can better understand their situation. Because, of course, just because somebody gives us an objection, it doesn't mean they're not going to buy. That's their default response. But we need to show them a way why we can help them work around that. So, for example, we're already using an external company for this. That's great, James. Not a problem at all. To be honest, most of the people I speak to say exactly the same thing. Tell me, out of interest, if you could change just one thing, wave a magic wand, one thing about what they do, what would it be? Well, I suppose sometimes they're a bit slow to get back to me. Okay, tell me a bit more about that. Well, I suppose there was this time where this happened and guess what? The prospect is opening up to me. Now, remember that broad thing? I asked a nice broad question, the upside down pyramid. One thing you could change about their services, what could it be? It's this. Now I'm going narrow. when that happened, what did that cause for you? Why did they do that? What did you tell them about that? Did you ask them why that happened? What was the impact of it? Now I'm just digging in on that pain. What I might do is get the prospect thinking about the fact that it may well be worth looking at some other options. So again, diffuse, statement, question, DSQ, that's fine, not a problem. Most of the people I speak to say exactly the same thing. Tell me if you could, or tell me, and then we ask a question. The statement can be anything you're comfortable with. It can be really relevant to their situation, or it can be very generic. I'll give you some generic examples because you can use them in every situation. But if you've got a statement that's more relevant, that's more product relevant, it might be around a certain supplier. So they might say, oh, we're using HubSpot for this. That's brilliant. And do you know what? I speak to people who use HubSpot all the time. It's a great CRM. In fact, we're partners with HubSpot and we absolutely love it. There's my statement. Tell me though, when you've used HubSpot for this, that, and the other, what have you found the functionality to be like? Now, I'm only using that as an example. We're HubSpot partners, so it's relevant in my scenario. But the point is, that statement doesn't have to be generic. It can be off the cuff. And if you know your objections well enough, and there's 3, 4, 5 that you get regularly, you can plan for that statement, just like I plan for the generic response to be. Most of the people I speak to say exactly the same thing. So guys, I hope that was somewhat useful. I've rocketed through a lot of information there. And I appreciate that there's a lot to take in. If you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to share these slides with you. You can do that on my email, which is owen@air-marketing.co.uk, or look me up on LinkedIn, and I'll be more than happy to share the slides with you. They are on our website, air-marketing.co.uk as well, if you'd like to go and take a look at those. Otherwise, I hope that you found that useful. If you've got any questions about it, get in touch and I'll be happy to help.
Thanks very much, Owen. Going to end the stream now. I'll give you a buzz.
No worries. Thanks.